we're going to continue the theme of unwanted animals with two other animal tales. A cat who has to prove his worth so he's not eaten, and a frog who is so unwanted by a princess that she splats him up against the wall. Ew. In both these stories, the magical talking animals don't fit with the humans because they seem to be of no value compared with the humans' own sense of self-worth. But by the end, they are out of place with the unworthy humans. In the first story, the cat is a magical helper to the humans. Have you ever had a pet who helped you along? Once upon a time, there was a miller. And this miller had three things to his name. He had a mill where he would grind the wheat. So everybody help me grind the wheat. He had a mill where he could grind the wheat. He had a donkey. Hee-haw. You want to say that with me? Hee-haw. Very good. He had a donkey that would help pull the millstone so that he could grind the wheat. He had the mill. He had the donkey. What does it say? Hee-haw. And he had a cat. But the cat was clever. This cat would catch mice in two different ways. He would pretend to be dead. And when he pretended to be dead, he would lie on his back with his legs, his paws up in the air. And the mice, thinking he was dead, well, they would just come over and just walk onto his belly where he would catch them and eat them. And he would also go into the mill and hide himself, bury himself in the flour with his paws exposed. And then the mice would come and see those paws, those tufty little paws. Oh, a nice place to take a nap. And they would climb onto that soft, tufty paw. And what do you think the cat would do? Grab it and what?
Eat it.
Eat it, yes. Well, the miller grew older. And the miller had 3 sons. And when the miller got very old, the miller died. And the 3 sons got each of those 3 things that the miller owned. And so the oldest son, he got the mill. Everybody grind the wheat. And the second oldest son, he got what?
The donkey.
Oh, the donkey. And so the first 2 sons, they were very happy because they could make money. They could use the donkey to pull the millstone and grind the wheat. But the third son, what did the third son get?
The cat.
The cat. And the third son was disappointed. He said, "What can I do with a cat? I cannot do anything with this cat. I could eat the cat." And he looked over at that cat, and that cat looked over at the miller's son. The miller's son looked over at that juicy cat, and the cat looked back. But the cat, he was smart and clever. And the cat answered back. He said, No, do not kill me. No, I can be useful to you. If you keep me around, I will show you. I will help you make your fortune. Well, the miller's son was surprised, of course, to see the cat speaking to him. But he let the cat live, and it was a good thing, because the very next day, the cat asked the miller's son for some special things. He said, "You provide me with some boots to cover up my tender paws so that I can go out into the world for you." And so the miller, he got 2 little boots. Everybody take your boots. Take a boot. And he put one boot on one paw, one of those hind paws. And he took the other boot. Take the other boot. Put it on that other hind paw. The cat stood up on those hind legs. And he said, "Now, I need you to get me a bag. And get me a little bag with a drawstring that I can put around my neck." And the miller's son, he got the bag with the drawstring, and he gave it to the cat. And the cat, he took that pouch, and everybody take the strings, and he put it around his neck. And he said, "Now I am off." And off he went walking down the road. Walk with me. And he walked on until he came to a wheat field. And in this wheat field, there were all of these bunnies hopping around, eating the wheat. And so he saw that wheat, and he gathered up some of that wheat, and he decided to play one of his tricks. He gathered up that wheat, and he put some of it into that bag, and he stuck that bag with the open drawstrings right on his belly. Did he put it on your belly? And he stuck those 4 paws up in the air, laid down in the middle of the road. Oh, y'all are brave. Y'all are doing this with me. He laid down in the middle of the road and pretended to be dead. Well, along came, boing, 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 some bunnies. Boing, boing. And they saw that wheat in the bag. And thinking the cat to be dead, they just went boing, 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 boing. And they went over and started to eat that wheat. But what did the cat do? Grabbed on and whoosh, closed the bag. And he put that bag around his neck and on he walked down the road. He walked on to the castle where the king lived. And he walked right up to the king and he said, "Ah, monsieur, I have brought you a gift from my master, the Marquis of Calabas." Can you say that name with me? The Marquis of Calabas. He gives you this gift. And the king, he opened up the pouch. Oh, a fine-looking rabbit. It would be delicious to eat. Oh, thank you. Tell your master, the Marquis of Calabas, that I thank him. And so the cat went back home. The next day, cat put on its boots. Put on your boots. Whoosh, whoosh. Put that drawstring pouch over his neck. Whoosh. I am off, and off he went down the road until he came to a cornfield. Oh, and there were birds flying around. They were pecking at that corn. Well, the cat decided to play one of his other tricks. And so he hid behind those stalks of corn. And he stuck his 2 tufty paws out from behind that corn. His body was hidden, but he put those tufty paws out that looked just like 2 birds' nests. And along the birds came. And 2 birds spied those 2 tufty spots that would be perfect for them to perch. And they flew along, and one of them whoop, landed right there. Another one whoop, landed right there. What do you think the cat did? Grabbed them. Where did he put them?
In the pouch.
In the pouch. Whoosh, drew the drawstring, slung it over his neck, and on he walked down the road to find the king. He came to the king. He said, "Ah, monsieur, I have brought you a gift from my master, who? The Marquis of Calabas." "Oh, thank you. tell your master, the Marquis of Calabas, that I thank him." And on he walked back home. Well, the next day, the cat found out that the king was going to be out riding, and he told the miller's son, "Ah, now today is your chance. You must come with me." And so he told the son to come with him on walking down the road. Well, the son, he followed, didn't know what was happening, and the cat put on his boots. Put on your boots. Whoosh, whoosh, slung that pouch over his neck, and he went walking out to the river, the undulating river. And he told the miller's son, he said, "You must go and take a bath in the river." And he told the miller's son to take off all his clothes. Well, miller's son, I won't ask you to participate in that part, but he took off all of his clothes, and he put his clothes by the bank of the river, and he dove into the river, and he started to bathe. Well, just about that time, the king came riding by with his daughter in a carriage. They were going out by the river for a countryside ride. Well, as soon as they rode by, Puss in Boots, for that's what this story is, ran out, waved his paws up into the air, and said, "Monsieur, oh sire, please, you must stop. My master, the Marquis of Calabas, he was bathing in the river, and some robbers, they have come and stolen his clothes. Oh, they have robbed him. You must come and help it." Well, the king, after having gotten all of these gifts from who? The Marquis of Calabas. Well, he liked the Marquis of Calabas. He said, "I will come and help him." And so he ordered the carriage to halt, and he ordered some of his own clothes to be given to the miller's son. Well, the miller's son, he came out drenched, put on those clothes, those beautiful clothes, and the miller's son was kind of a handsome man himself, so when he got all dressed up and in the king's own clothes, he looked very princely indeed. And he walked out. And the princess who was sitting in that carriage saw. Oh, she liked what she saw. And the miller's son, he looked at the princess, and oh, he liked what he saw. But was he really a prince? No. So he still had a problem, but the cat wasn't done. And the king invited the Marquis of Calabas to come in and sit inside the carriage with them and go riding with him. Well, the miller's son, he climbed right in. And he was right beside the king. and the king's daughter. And on they rode. And ahead of them ran who?
Puss in Boots.
Puss in Boots, yes. And on he ran. And Puss in Boots ran until he came to that wheat field. And by now, all of the people in the wheat field were using their scythes, their big scythes with those long handles and the sharp blade. They were using it to whoosh, whoosh, cut down the wheat. Well, he passed by and he said, You, the king is about to ride by. You must tell the king when he passes by that all of this wheat field belongs to my master, the Marquis of Calabas. If you do not, I will have you ground into sausage meat. And on he ran. Well, up behind him came who?
The king.
The king, right. And the king, he ordered the carriage to stop. He saw this lovely wheat field. He'd never seen it before. And he called out to the workers in the field. He said, who does this field belong to? Who did they say?
The Marquis of Calabas.
The Marquis of Calabas. They were afraid. And he said, oh, he turned to the miller's son. The miller's son said, yes, yes, this is my field. And on they rode. And on ran who? Puss in Boots on ahead of them. And he ran until he came to that cornfield. And the workers were there out in the cornfield picking all of the corn. And as he ran by, he stopped and he said, You, the king is about to ride by. You must tell the king when he rides by that all of this cornfield belongs to the Marquis of Calabas. If you do not, I will have you turned into sausage meat. And on he ran. And who came riding up behind them? The king. The king came riding by. He ordered the carriage to stop. He looked out. Oh, it's a beautiful cornfield. Who does this cornfield belong to? What did they say?
The
Marquis of Calabas. Oh, you have a lovely cornfield. Oui. And on they rode. And on ahead, Puss in Boots ran until he came to a castle. Oh, and the castle had a huge door. And the door was cracked. He went inside. And the cat, you remember, he was very clever. Yes. And he knew that inside that castle there lived an ogre. And the ogre had magic powers to transform into anything he wanted to. Well, in went the cat. He saw the ogre. The ogre saw the cat. Ah! You look tasty. Oh, monsieur, I have heard that you can transform into any creatures that you want. Ah! It is true. Well, I do not believe it. Can you show me? Ah, I will show you. And the ogre clapped his big hands. Everybody take your big hands. And he transformed. His 3 little sprigs of hair fluffed out and became a lion. And that big lion cat beside that little Puss in Boots cat, what did the Puss in Boots cat do? He shivered and he couldn't run, so he climbed up into the rafters, which was hard to do when you're wearing boots. But he ran up and the ogre took his big paws then. Everybody take your big paws. Transformed back into an ogre. Well, Puss in Boots, he climbed back down. He said, well, it is easy for someone as large as you to transform into something large like a lion, but you could never transform into something small. That would be impossible. Well, the ogre, he'd been challenged. He said, I could too. Took his big hands. Everybody take your big hands. He clapped them, and he transformed into a tiny mouse. And what did the cat do to the mouse?
He caught it.
He caught it and he ate it. And that was the end of the ogre. And the ogre of that castle had owned the wheat field and the cornfield. And who came riding up?
The king.
The king. And the king came out, and Puss in Boots came walking out, with those 2 boots on, the pouch around his neck. He came walking out, and the king asked Puss in Boots, he said, who owns this beautiful castle? And who did he say? The Marquis of Calabas, because now he did. And by that time, the Marquis of Calabas and the princess Well, they had fallen in love. He liked what he saw, and she liked what she saw. And they were married. And they lived happily ever after. And Puss in Boots, well, he never again had to catch a mouse. Unless, of course, he wanted to. The end. The story you just heard was recorded in France over 300 years ago in 1697. But the story of Puss in Boots doesn't end in France. The story traveled to France from Italy. In Straparola's Italian version, the cat was a fairy. But the story of Puss in Boots doesn't end there either. We can go back to the 3rd century BCE, to India, to one of the most influential written records of oral folklore, the Panchatantra. Now, in this collection of over 700 animal fables and folk stories, there's a cat who serves as a magical helper and tries to make his fortune in the king's castle. Now, some scholars believe that there are hundreds of different versions of this story. All of these versions are part of an overarching tale type, the cat as helper, or Aaron Thompson Uther tale type 545b, under the larger heading of supernatural helpers. Now, cats being supernatural and being helpers, well, that's a very old idea. In ancient Egypt, cats were worshipped for their supernatural powers, most familiarly as the cat goddess Isis. The American folklorist Dan Ben Amos tells us that the worship of Isis, the cat goddess, well, it eventually made its way to Rome, and then later to Europe. And by the time that cat worship reached France, Germany, and England, the religious associations dissolved, but cats kept their mystical and supernatural connotations. Oral folklore is like a web that stretches out across time. In this one story, we have a classic French version, which borrowed from an earlier Italian version, in which we can trace elements back to ancient India and Egypt. Stories are living things. They live and they die. They morph and they adapt over time as they pass from one country to another and from one time period to another. Let's listen to another story about an animal who just didn't seem to fit in. This time, a folk tale from the Brothers Grimm. In olden times, when wishing still helped, there lived a little princess. And this little princess, well, she cared about one thing more than anything else in the whole world, and that thing was herself. But the next best thing that she cared about was a little golden ball, eine schöne goldene Kugel. And she would take that ball, that schöne goldene Kugel, and she would toss it up and down. She would toss it up, everybody take your ball in your hand. She would toss it up and catch it. And she would toss it up and she would catch it. And she would toss, oh, you want the ball? You want my ball? Here, you catch my ball. Here. Oh, you catch it. Now give it back, it's mine. Toss it back. No. Meine goldene Kugel. Well, she would take this ball everywhere she went, and one day she went out walking deep into the woods. It was a hot day. And she came to a little clearing. There was a well in the middle of that clearing with cool, cool water. She went over to the edge of that well and she sat down and she started to toss her ball. Everybody toss your ball. Up and down. And up and down. Meine schöne goldene Kugel. Up! And she tossed it higher and higher, and she tossed it high, and it landed. It slipped out of her fingers and went whoop, whoop, whoop into the murky water of that well. Oh, meine goldene Kugel. And she took her hand and she tried to put her hand down into that water, but it was, as soon as she sunk her hand down into that water, she couldn't even see it. It was so dark and murky and, oh, meine goldene Kugel. I would give anything to have back my goldene Kugel. I would give my jewels. I would give my pearls. I would give my clothes. Oh, no. And after a while of crying by the edge of that well, something came bubbling up out of the water. Whoop, whoop. 2 bulging eyes. And then the smiling face and 2 webbed feet of a frog. Let him. Princess, why are you crying? Oh, my golden kugel, it has fallen down into the well, and I cannot get it back. And I would give anything. I would give my pearls. I would give my jewels. I would give my clothes. I do not care for your pearls or your jewels or your clothes. But I will get your ball back. Oh, you would? Oh, you would get me my ball back if. And this is how it is in stories, right? There's always a catch. Yeah. If you will take me back home with you and let me snuggle beside you and eat off of your golden plate and get warm and cozy all snuggled up beside you. Well, the girl, ew. She did not like the idea of that, but she thought, well, he's a very tiny frog, and I have such long legs compared with his. I could have him bring my ball back to me, and then I could just run away back home. I don't have to. Yes, yeah, you can go get my ball. Thank you, yes. And so down he went under the water. Whoop, 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 whoop. And all she saw were little bubbles coming up on the surface of that murky water, and after a while, more bubbles. And she saw those 2 bulging eyes coming out of the surface of the water, and that smiling face, and inside that frog's smiling face was a golden kugel. And he spit it out onto the edge of that well, and that slime-covered ball, it rolled over. And she reached down. She picked up her golden kugel. Everybody pick up your golden kugel. She wiped it off on the grass. And she said, Ducka! And she went running away. Everybody run away. And the poor frog, he said, oh, wait, princess, wait! But off she ran back home. Well, she had her golden ball. And she was happy. And that very night, she had forgotten by that time all about the little frog. She walked over and she was eating that night with her golden kugel right beside her. And she was eating off of her little golden plate with her father, the king, and her mother, the queen. Well, all of a sudden, she heard it outside the door. And then she heard a very slimy, very wet knock on the door. Well, she set down her golden fork. She said, Moment, maldita. And she set down that fork and she walked over to the door, and everybody reached under the door. She opened the door and she looked out, and there was no one there. But then she looked down, and who do you think she saw? The frog. Bled Princess, you ran off without me. Well, the frog, he went hopping right inside. Well, the king, he turned to his daughter. He said, What is that? She said, Oh, Daddy, I met a frog in the woods today. I was throwing my golden kugel up, and it fell into a well, and the frog, he offered to get it for me if I would bring him home with me, and he got the ball back from me, and I took it back, but I did not want. He is so icky, no. So I came back, and I came running back home, and I left him there in the woods. Said, You are a princess. You keep your promises. But Daddy, he is so go. But Daddy, he is such an ego. But Daddy, he's so icky go. And so she bent down and she picked up the frog, ready to pick up that icky frog. Ooh. She picked it up and she put it right there beside her at her chair by her golden plate. Now, princess, will you put my golden plate right beside yours? And so she took a golden plate, scooted it over. She looked at her father. He said, Go! And so she scooted that golden plate right beside hers. Somebody scoot your golden plate. Scooted that golden plate beside hers. And that frog started eating off of that plate right beside her. And after a while, he said, Now, princess, will you take me upstairs and let me snuggle beside you in your warm little bed? Daddy, I did that. Go! And so she picked up that frog. Everybody pick up your frog. She picked up that frog. And she walked up those marble steps up to her room. She shut the door. And she sat down on her bed. And she looked at that frog. And that frog looked up at her. Blim. And she picked up that frog. Are you petting your frog? Ew. She picked up that frog. She looked at him. She thought about it. And she went, whoosh, 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 and she smacked him up against the wall, and wham! There he splatted against the wall. And she rolled over in her bed and thought, that is the end of that. And as that poor frog came slimily sliding down the wall, she curled over and she heard a strange sound. It's like a sound she'd never heard before. She turned around, and there, instead of a slimy frog on the ground, it was the most handsome prince she had ever seen. Oh, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and she said, "Oh, well, you are not nasty at all, are you?" And her little golden ball, which she had always kept with her, to take your golden ball, when she looked at that handsome prince, she let that golden ball fall, and it rolled off across the ground away from her, and she cared not where it went. And the next morning, the prince's carriage came riding up, a beautiful white carriage pulled by 8 horses with plumes on them, and out came the prince. He went walking out to his carriage, and he turned, and he held out his hand for the princess. And the princess, she took his hand. And the king and the queen had come outside to see their daughter off. And the princess, she turned to her father. And as most fathers and mothers usually have to do at some point in their lives for their daughters, what do you think they said? Go! But this time they said it with a smile. And she took the prince's hand, and he helped her up into that carriage. And as they drove off, faithful Heinrich, can you say Heinrich?
Heinrich.
It's the lovely German way to say Henry. Heinrich, the servant of that prince. As he was driving those horses away from inside the carriage, the prince and the princess, they heard a cracking sound. And they thought that the carriage itself was breaking in two. And so the prince, he ordered the carriage to stop. And he thought there was something wrong with the carriage, but Heinrich, he leaned over, he said, no, nur mich, it's only me. Because Heinrich, who loved the prince so, when the prince was transformed into the figure of Blibm, that frog, it broke Heinrich's heart. And he had 3 iron bands placed around his heart to hold that broken heart together. But when he saw his prince so transformed back into his rightful shape, and when he saw the princess so transformed from the person who she once was, his heart was filled to bursting, and it broke those 3 iron bands around his heart. And so faithful Heinrich, with a full heart, and the prince and the princess rode off together, and they were happy to the end of their days. In The Frog Prince, we get to see 2 transformations. The frog back into the prince, and the princess into a more mature, less selfish version of herself. So in both of these stories, in this lecture, we've seen characters who are not what they seem to be. A cat who turns out to be cleverer than any human, and the lowly frog who is really a prince, and the selfish princess who comes into her own as a mature, more generous and wiser person. Perhaps we can learn from these stories not only that things are not always what they seem, but also that things don't necessarily stay the way they are, that growth and maturity are possible, that people can change, can get stronger and smarter about the way they live.